370-mile all-round family road trip from Leicester to Whitby in our almost 3-year-old Tesla Model 3 that was last rated at 229 miles at 100% from 9 months ago. Lucky for you, I've decided to document this journey for you once again to help bring this Tesla road tripping to life, but with a new dynamic twist that I promised you for some time. This trip is significant for us because it's the furthest I tend to drive across a calendar year with my Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive. Now, officially my Tesla Model 3 was rated at 263 EPA miles at the time of purchase. However, taking into account real-world range, aka practical family life, that being 4 passengers, bags, suitcases, motorway and highway driving, achieving the full 263 miles was never going to be realistic, right? Especially with the vast elevation and the hills en route to our end destination. Frankly, this round trip will really test the legs of our Tesla Model 3. It's not just the distance that's tested. Our nearest Tesla Supercharger is 73 miles away or 146 miles on a road trip basis. This does leave range margin for unforeseen circumstances. However, the Supercharger isn't exactly down the road. The promised twist I mentioned earlier is an interesting comparison I promised you months ago. Remember when I swapped my old Tesla wheel covers that I installed last year to these more aero-efficient third-party wheel covers bolted on today? I can finally address whether they can add more range by being less draggy than the previous covers by comparing the efficiency to last year's figures. It won't be hugely scientific, but a real-world practical A vs B test in similar conditions. Plus, I got to test Enhanced Autopilot for the first time in over 2 years. Therefore, this video isn't just your typical EV family road trip video. We're talking about efficiency, range enhancing tips, a rant against Costa Coffee, Enhanced Autopilot, and wheel cover efficiency. So many areas to cover with this very video, so buckle up, hit that like button, subscribe and hit that notification bell. It just really helps me out. Right, time to get into the journey and to show you how it all plays out. So I've done no prior planning to this journey. I've just inputted the destination into the Tesla navigation and it will take out all and any military planning that you'd think you'd need to plan an EV road trip. Something a petrol driver once told me before. Very strange, I know. It will tell you when and where to stop and how long you'd need to charge. The navigation also takes into account a variety of range affecting factors such as forecasting weather, wind speed, wind direction, real-time traffic, speeds on the roads and elevation changes en route. Therefore, it should minimise any nasty range surprises along the way. To put it simply, I find the Tesla navigation forecasting to be the most accurate navigation solution, and you can even dial in locations via the Tesla app if you're not in your car, which is very handy for spontaneous and eccentric road trip projections from your fingertips. For my expected journey, it's 3 hours and 25 minutes in total, including a 20-minute charging session. The first stint to the Tesla Superchargers is around 1 hour 35 minutes, consisting of mainly 70 miles per hour motorway driving. Now, in reality, I don't have charging at my destination, and I will need to do a round trip, so I do need some extra juice than the 20 minutes charging stop advised. If you want to work this out yourself, you can add home as the last waypoint on the navigation after the destination. However, as I was already aware of what was required for my trip last year, I knew what was required. The weather conditions are favourable. It's a mild morning around 12 degrees centigrade. This was a bank holiday weekend, so the traffic may be more than usual, but a 6 AM start with the kids and the wife was a well-designed decision to minimise traffic and to get more out of the day itself. I've deliberately left the car filthy. That's because I know exactly why you don't wash a Tesla before a road trip, and ultimately the end will confirm that. For reference on how representable the trip will be, the boot is fully loaded with a suitcase and bags. We haven't held back, so achieving 263 miles at a highway motorway mileage with this load is likely impractical. So how does the journey to the Supercharger actually play out? Well, we leave about 6:30 in the morning, and so the time to the Supercharger is around 1 hour and 22 minutes after 15 minutes of driving. It's only 82 miles from here, so starting the journey with around 80 to 90% state of charge isn't going to be a problem at all. In fact, together with navigating to the Supercharger, this will help me achieve faster charging speeds, and that's because the car will heat the battery to the most favourable condition, and this is called preconditioning, and the car will notify you of this process like so, and this will actually utilise extra energy, but it will be incorporated into the forecast and it will affect your vehicle's efficiency ever so slightly, but the major benefit is the quicker charging speeds and so less time charging. Talking about efficiency, just 50 minutes in, I'm achieving around 312 watt-hour miles, which is frankly pretty poor. That's just over 3 miles per kilowatt hour, and I was hoping for better. But this is a marathon, not a sprint, with just 35 minutes later, with 69% charge remaining, and it's already dropped to 257 watt-hour miles, and just shy of 4 miles a kilowatt hour. A super cool way to work out if you can extend your range is by utilising the energy graph on screen. This gives you a live prediction of your remaining battery and where the range is being gained or lost in comparison against the forecast, and it can give you some extra tips. Here you can see I've actually consumed 3% more energy than initially projected, and that's probably because of the lane switching on the motorway, just accelerating around slow traffic, etc. Where the graph is green, like at the start, this is where I've used less energy than predicted, and orange is, unfortunately, more than predicted. Yikes, it's only marginal below the predicted line. In fact, it's actually 1.8% lower than predicted. Anyhow, this stint was incredibly smooth, no traffic, kids were well behaved, even the wife agreed to take some video footage to highlight how smooth this stint was to drive. Enhanced autopilot here was also pretty stellar, very little disengagements till I actually tried to get something on video for some weird reason. About 20 minutes before the supercharger, I'd gained some energy over forecast and the efficiency had dropped to 247 watt-hour miles, equivalent to 4 miles per kilowatt hour. Finally, we arrived with 41% state of charge remaining. This says it was 2.4% more than forecast, and 5.2% of that was down to my driving styles. Yikes, that's pretty high. I can assure you that I was a responsible parent and I wasn't flooring it. In fact, the initial navigation projection was actually 41% as per this original footage, but we did actually leave 10 minutes later, so maybe that had a little bit of a difference within that. We ended the stint at 239 watt-hour miles, or about 4.2 miles per kilowatt hour, so time to supercharge. To my surprise, at 8 AM on Saturday morning, on a bank holiday weekend, no one was using the Tesla superchargers. We plugged in and it starts off at around 100 kilowatt hours speed, but we were desperate for some breakfast and a strong coffee, so we head over to Costa Coffee, and unfortunately this is where my rant's going to start. Costa Coffee. I would like my arms and legs back, please. Near £25 for 2 coffees in refillable mugs, 2 breakfast carbs, cheese toasty, a bag of popcorn and pizza. That's with 10% drinks voucher too. Is it me, or is that literally nuts for coffee and breakfast in 2023? I know this is road services and to expect higher prices, but between the bacon baps and the coffee, that was like £18 alone because they overcharge on both items and they apparently don't run their breakfast combo at this site. And having looked at Greggs after, they run a very reasonable breakfast deal for less than what I paid for the coffee alone. Therefore, my advice is to you, if you want to use these superchargers, skip Costa Coffee and head to Greggs if you want the breakfast combo. The charging itself was actually under 45 minutes long, and that was actually better than initially advised by the Tesla navigation. This worked great as we had breakfast and we used the toilet facilities within that time. The charging speed dropped to around 37 kilowatt hours at around 80%, and then it dropped to about 10 kilowatt hours when it finished at 100%, and we got 27 kilowatt hours of electric in total here, and without my free supercharger miles, it would have then cost me £9.35 for that charge, which is very respectable for public rapid charging in 2023. Another note for EV drivers is that they've installed some more EV charging points here. These weren't here this time last year, so it's always interesting to see the infrastructure build out year on year. The last part of our stint is projected to be just 75 miles, but this time the route is not plain sailing motorway. This is the north of England. The motorway runs thin and turns into dual carriageways, and then that slums out into single carriageways across the countryside and over the Moors National Park, which is very hilly, and getting stuck behind caravans and tractors is expected. The journey was projected to be an hour and 35 minutes drive and arriving with 65% range. Initially, I thought this was not going to be possible because I know it's a very taxing trip when it comes to elevation and to traffic, but only time will tell. So let's head off and see what we can achieve for efficiency and round off the wheel cover efficiency comparison. The results offer a very interesting insight for sure. A tip for those driving straight from a supercharger is that your car will feel so snappy and lively after a supercharge. The car is very much alive after this point, so do take it easy on the acceleration as the battery begins to cool. And if you start off with some terrible efficiency after a supercharge, this is completely normal. It will soon adjust itself back to normality as it begins to cool down. For example, after around 20 minutes and 19 miles, I was already at 240 watt-hours per mile. But the end of the motorway and dual carriageways begins to take effect, and in comes the windy and hilly roads of the Moors Natural Park. Whilst it's pretty fun to drive, especially around the downhill U-turn, my consumption is more than predicted again. Well, it's 3.8% more than forecast, and again that's mainly down to my driving style. The elevation is at 0.8% more than predicted also. My state of charge is already at 66% with 65% predicted and 10 miles to go. Seems a stretch too far, but I know there is some downhill elevation changes to gain charge from, and the flat line on the chart also demonstrates that expectation from the navigation. The end is near and the sea can even be seen in the distance as the downhill driving sequence begins. The end result was 64% state of charge and a whopping 207 watt-hour miles for this stint. That's just 7 watts shy of 5 miles a kilowatt hour, meaning the total trip was around 3 hours and 50 minutes, 25 minutes longer than predicted, but that was all down to charging to 100% rather than the recommended amount by the system. The total consumption from the family road trip was 223 watt-hour miles, utilising around 38 kilowatt hours, and so if utilising a full battery's worth of range, we would not have achieved 263 miles as rated. But this was not expected, with the route not so straightforward and the weight from the extra passengers and luggage. But how did I compare to last year? Were the Uber turbine-like wheels more aero efficient than the standard alloy cover dupe? So to conclude, this road trip was a success. In fact, it was actually the quickest time that we had managed to drive to Whitby. I'm pretty sure the quickest trip that we actually got there in a petrol car before was around 3 hours and 30 minutes, and so it wasn't far off that time with charging. In terms of efficiency, the Uber turbine-like wheel covers were more efficient than my previous wheel covers. However, the difference was actually next to negligible at 225 watt-hour miles compared to 223 watt-hour miles that I achieved this time round. So we consumed 2 less watt-hour per miles. That said, we did actually hit some traffic last year, and so we ended up utilising more energy at 40 kilowatt hours rather than the 38 kilowatt hours at present. That traffic meant that we were actually in the car for a longer period of time and subsequently driving at lower speeds, enhancing the range efficiency achieved with older wheel covers. That's my theory anyway. Therefore, having drove with these new covers for a number of months, I still think this result displayed here is correct, but the extent of the result could be masked, and that's why my video journey on the way home actually made me more conclusive as we complete the speed run home. We won't need 100% charge on that run, just what the car needs, but there is a slight hiccup prior to that journey home, and it got me again, and I'm talking about phantom drain. That actually cost me a few percentage points, should we say, but more on that next time out, and more on enhanced autopilot, because I've not talked about that as much as what I would have liked to. I'm really sorry I couldn't actually fit everything in this one video, and if I'm being completely honest, I hate having to move on to a separate video. It's literally how the journey and just the data ultimately plans out. So just stay tuned for the grand outcome. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share the content with anyone that you think may find this beneficial. I hope you like this video, and yeah, you folks have been great. As always, I'll see you in the finale. Ciao.